another edition of Searching the Heart this morning, and I'm still on the same topic, considering the new selection of the new Pope. Christian leadership has progressed over the centuries, and of course we build our understanding of what Christian leadership should be from the Bible. Okay, this is a fundamental Christian doctrine, and over the years, yes, Christianity has actually evolved in so many ways, but it is debatable whether that evolution or change is actually something that can go on without really wiping Christianity off the map, because Christianity is based on certain principles. It's just like the scientific method. Scientific method is based on certain principles. If you break the laws that guide the scientific method, it changes. It's not science anymore, and that is the truth of it. And there's that tendency to believe that everything can change, while we will still call that thing the same name. Okay, and of course, it is a 21st century tendency that comes from progress. Once progress comes, there's that idea that we should be liberal, we should allow things to just continue to go down that slippery slope. It's an issue. It's an issue that is being discussed as we speak in the international community, and it has caused a lot of upheavals. Leaders have come up just because of that, okay? And we need to continue to talk about it. And in this case, we're talking about the church, the Christian church, okay? And we're in a time where, although there is a lot of push to be progressive, to be liberal, people are asking themselves the question, should I really go ahead with this or that? And it's a healthy thing. It's a healthy discussion, and this is one of the things we'll be doing today. Okay, now I'm going to be talking about a very, very interesting topic today under that very general topic, vis-a-vis the new Pope. Understanding Eli's predicament. Understanding Eli's predicament. Okay, now there was a film. Actually, this is a very interesting film. No Christian child would have grown up, maybe one or two exceptions, without hearing the story of Eli and Samuel and the sons of Eli. Okay, and there was a film that was made in 2010 titled The Sons of Eli. Okay, I mean the Book of Eli. Sorry, the Book of Eli. It was acted by Denzel Washington and directed by the Hughes brothers, and written by Gary Whitta. Okay, that film, the film is dear to my heart. Being a Christian, I know it is coined from a Christian story, and it talks about actually Eli's situation. It's a kind of a what will you call it now? A parable or something, trying to speak about a particular situation. And for that film, there is a generation that tend to behave like the sons of Eli. And how do the sons of Eli behave? Okay, how do the sons of Eli behave? Let us look at that. First of all, it speaks about the inability of human beings to handle prosperity. Okay, the inability of human beings to handle prosperity. And when you look at this through the lens I'm going to be looking at it today, I will try to really explain what is really going on. That is why I've titled it Understanding Eli's Predicament. Okay, I want to look at it from a more maybe empathetic perspective, but looking at the issues that we have to deal with. Okay, now first of all, the idea is that salvation comes at the greatest cost to God. Okay, it was God's idea to save humanity, and he went ahead to do that at the greatest cost. Now, this is what brings about the theory of recapitulation brought about by Irenaeus, propounded by Irenaeus. And Irenaeus was of the opinion that God actually stopped resisting creation. That in the universe there is the tendency for God to resist creation. And this was like thousands of years before human beings went into space. It's a Greek philosophy, okay? The Greeks believe that God did not create the physical world. And it's from that Irenaeus, that understanding propagated the whole Greek civilization. And Irenaeus, in trying to explain why then Jesus came to save human beings, coined the theory of recapitulation. That means God actually resisted, by creating human beings, he resisted he stopped resisting creation, and in bringing Jesus Christ, he recapitulated again. Okay, so this is what it is all about. Okay, because, and the reason for this is because salvation comes at the greatest cost to him, and those who are saved must participate in this salvation. And this is what we see. Okay, this is what we see. This is a very interesting issue, and I could spend hours and hours, and these books and books and books have been written and can be written about the subject. Just to talk about this is something we should really sit down and really, but I cannot talk about it in this short time I have. So we're going to be looking more into this after this short break.
Discover a transformative journey into the kingdom of heaven. Following the initial publication, the author dives deeper with two insightful follow-up books. Ever felt disconnected from God even in worship? Explore how God's unconventional ways can transform your life. How can you align with divine plans, avoiding distractions? Find answers in The Kingdom of Heaven on Earth and The 3, Illuminating Christian Truths and Prophetic Practices. Unlock profound insights guiding you toward a deeper connection with God. Don't miss out. Dive into this enlightening exploration today. Click the link on the caption to get your copy.
So salvation comes at the greatest cost. Okay? But God is prosperous. Okay? God is very rich. Look at the expanse of the universe. It is now in this age that we're beginning to discover how massive the universe is. Okay, and it is very strange for many scientists to discover that in all this mass, it is so difficult to find an Earth-like civilization anywhere else in the universe. First of all, in the solar system that is so massive, Earth is the only place where there is such a civilization. And the only possible, it's not even yet confirmed, presence of life anywhere else is like millions and millions of miles away. Okay, and so this is not even in the Alpha Centauri has such a thing been discovered yet. Okay, so this is what is going on, and to realize that, of course, if there is a God, he must be very prosperous, he must be very rich, having created us, having been able to superintend over such a massive universe. Okay, that we have not yet even known the extent of, considering the presence of things like black holes and all those things. Okay, so he is very prosperous. He is very prosperous, even though it cost him a lot just to make us. And so this dilemma is very present in our eyes, and we're still trying to deal with it, both scientifically and, before that, theologically. Okay, people over the millennia have been trying to deal with this idea. Okay, that if he has so much, why is he resisting creation? Why is he resisting creation? Okay, so this is the issue. And one of the things we see is that the nature of his creation, especially as revealed in we human beings is that we don't know how to handle prosperity. Okay, as we started to say, we do not know how to handle prosperity. And this seems to explain the secret to why God seems to resist creation at first, and then in the same voice allows suffering. When you go to the story of the Garden of Eden, you would feel that if God was to create human beings, why did he put that tree there to tempt them? Okay, why did he allow the presence of that tree? And it goes with the same explanation, and that explanation is that he is still very skeptical about creation itself. Okay, though he has stopped resisting it. He has stopped resisting creation. Yes, he's still skeptical about it. Okay, he's still skeptical about creation, and so he allows suffering. He allows suffering so that he will not create a problem that will not be able to be solved. Now, another part of that story is explained in Ezekiel 28 and other parts of the Bible also, talking about Lucifer, who rebelled against God. And because of that experience, so human beings are not the first group of people that have been created. There are others who were created before us, called angels in the Bible. Okay, and because of their rebellion, God does not want us to repeat that. Okay, so this is the problem. This is some of the issues at stake. So we've just started to browse the surface of this idea, but trying to explain it empathetically for us to understand why human beings are unable to handle prosperity. If a higher civilization has already failed, of course, you know that human beings, as weak as we are, have the tendency to fail even more. But the answer to the question is that since we cannot live eternally, spirit beings can live eternally, as it were. But since we human beings have a limited lifespan, we are unable to proliferate that rebellion beyond the physical world. Okay, so this is the idea, and God is deliberately allowing us to suffer, deliberately allowing us to experience failure, so that for that reason that we are unable now to proliferate that failure eternally. Okay, so these are theological concepts. They are not scientific concepts. They are theological concepts. Okay, so there's no reason to try to explain them scientifically yet. Okay, so this is the issue, and the inability of human beings to handle suffering, to handle prosperity, is seen in the story of the Israelites themselves, starting from the story of Moses and moving through to the point where the Israelites inherit the promised land. And when they find themselves in a settled state in the promised land, they begin to struggle with these issues. And Eli is one of the priests of God who becomes a judge, okay, who doubles as a judge, who is able to establish, like Moses, a stable environment, okay, within the problems the Israelites were facing. That was after the death of Joshua and some other judges that came after Joshua. Eli came up, and he was a bit successful. And this is how we begin to see, to tap into this idea of what we Christians are experiencing in our generation today. In this very minimal setup, okay, first of all, the first failure was experienced with Moses. A journey of about a year took 40 years because the Israelites were not able to appreciate what God had done for them and could not learn their lesson, and so they kept on grumbling against God. One time they would ask for food, God would rain down manna from heaven, as the story goes. They would ask for meat, God would send birds, quails, They would ask for water, and God will instruct Moses to speak to the rock, and water will gush out. But all these things were not things they could appreciate. They continued to grumble and to rebel against God. And because of that, a whole generation was wiped off the face of the earth before a new generation came up. Now, this new generation are the generation that entered the promised land. So, entering the promised land, judges came up and they kept on struggling with these issues. And Eli was one of those judges. And Eli's story is very peculiar, okay? It's very peculiar. It's like the Bible stops and begins to give us a narration. Eli is very important in the whole story because he comes just before the time of the kings, just a little before the time of the kings, at the tail end of the rule of the judges of Israel, okay? It's a dispensational kind of thing, and he is important because he sets the stage for what God would do in Israel for another few generations, okay? And his story is very clear. He is a priest, a religious leader, and also a judge, okay? Of course, we know Moses was those things, but he was instructed to separate those responsibilities and give part to his brother Aaron, okay? And that is how there was kind of separation of church and state, okay? Now, but in Eli's case, he was both of these things, okay? To show you that he was a strong man, okay? He was very, first of all, a leader, a typical leader of his type that was very important and very necessary for the time that he was in. We will pause here and look at what happened to this man, Eli. So Eli was a strong man, okay? Shown by the necessity of him collapsing both responsibilities of the priest and the judge together, okay? So he held the church and state together, and he ruled during his time, okay? But God was about doing something in Israel, and something was really happening in the household of Eli himself, okay? His sons, of course, like the tradition was, were also priests. And they were responsible, just like the sons of Aaron, if you remember the sons of Aaron, to give sacrifices on a daily basis in the tabernacle, okay, before God, before the ark of God, okay. And of course, those responsibilities were solely carried out by them. And it was said in the book of Judges that they did not really carry out these responsibilities with the utmost honesty and respect for God's presence. Remember, the sons of Aaron did something similar, and they were killed instantaneously, okay, by the fire that came out of the Holy of Holies and struck them down, okay. But at this time, God wasn't really, enthusiastic in doing that to them, but he had a plan in place. It was said that these men were corrupt men, okay, that stole from the sacrifices, that did not obey the rules that govern how the priests of God should accept offerings and sacrifices from people, and so God intended to punish them. Okay, and how did God do that? He anointed a man called Samuel. Okay, this was a boy that was conceived by the special blessing of God to a woman called Hannah, and he came up. She promised God that she would give this child back to him to serve him as a priest, if only he would give her the child in the first place. And God accepted. And so she presented Samuel to Eli to mentor as a priest. Okay? And of course, Samuel was to be the next judge of the nation of Israel. Okay? And what we see in this whole scenario is that Samuel was as a replacement for Eli and his sons. So Samuel and his sons took over the position of Eli and his sons because God was angry with Eli and his sons and was determined to stop their reign. So at the end of the day, God removed Eli and his sons from that position. So that is the whole summary of the story. But what is the lesson behind the story? The lesson behind the story is simple. At a time of stability, at a time of being in a settled land, the children of Israel were unable to handle this stable situation. They used the stable situation of prosperity, relative prosperity, to indulge themselves instead of being attentive to God's word, instead of being concerned about obedience to God, instead of being just to one another, living in peace with one another. They decided to exploit the situation and they did whatever they wanted to do. And these two sons of Eli were an example of what happened. And Eli himself, okay, because of his sons, Eli himself was condemned to their faith, okay, to their fate. So this is what happened. So this is the idea of the sons of Eli. And this film, acted out by Denzel Washington, the book of Eli, tries to now apply this to our modern time, okay. And the Bible is actually what the book of Eli is, okay. And so this film, I could stop this whole talk and just let you watch the film, as long as you know the story behind it, okay, and you will understand what I'm talking about. This is what the leaders of the church today, which the Pope is one, a very important one, should be able to understand. Okay? First of all, the system called Christianity is the ideal that God has planned for through 5 millennia, even more than that, well estimated based on the age of the Bible itself. Okay? The time of writing of the Bible. Even more than that, it is an ideal system. So it taps into the prosperity of God, of this God that created the whole universe. Okay? So giving that power, remember what Jesus Christ told Peter. He says, "What the keys to the kingdom I hand over to you." Okay? Whatever you bind on earth, are bound in heaven. Okay? If you forgive anybody, he's forgiven. That is tremendous power. And this is the power that the Pope claims to have up to today, okay, as a successor of the Apostle Peter. This is tremendous power, and you cannot. This is power that extends through the solar system. Let me just try to scientifically make you understand. Not just the Earth, which is a massive planet, okay, but extends to the whole of the solar system, and to, if necessary, if possible, the whole of the universe till we find life. Okay? This is that power. Okay? I give you the keys to heaven, as it were. The keys to the kingdom of heaven. Okay? This is great and tremendous power. You cannot play with this kind of power. Okay? And in that very light, because of our nature, of our inability to handle prosperity, it affects how we can practice this system. It is an ideal system. Okay? It is an ideal system, and we are unable to perfectly implement this system that God himself has brought to us. Okay, so that is what Christianity is. Although many people will laugh at that and think that it is not so, but it is, and it is proving to be so. Okay, through the prophecies that are seen to have been spoken thousands of years ago that are now coming true. Okay, so it is that system that we are giving superintendence over, and yet do not seem to have the power to handle. Okay, so this is what Gary Witter, in his writing, the book of Eli tries to portray. Okay, this is what he tries to portray, and the people, the Hughes brothers were able to direct it and acted out by Denzel Washington. Okay, so this is what really is happening in real life. It is not just a theme of a movie. No, the movie is speaking of real events, what we are experiencing today. Okay, so what are the issues that we have to deal with? What are the issues that a civilization has to deal with in this sense? A civilization that has all this power, and a human civilization for that matter. Okay, number one is corruption. Okay, corruption as seen in the sons of Eli situation. Okay, they were in charge of the sacrifices, is in charge of collecting the gifts the people brought, the offerings, and of course it was dictated in the Bible that this is where they should they should earn their food from, their living from. Okay, already it was theirs, okay, based on certain rules, but they did not really follow these rules. Okay, they used their power, to circumvent some of these rules, and took more than they should take, and this was what was happening. Okay, so God was angry with them. Okay, and if you remember the story that followed that, you will discover that that was the period where part of the punishment was that the Philistines, who were the neighbors of the Israelites, actually conquered Israel and took away the ark. Okay, and God used that whole story to speak to the Israelites themselves and teach them the art of reverence. Okay, the art of leadership, and this is what happened. But if you remember the story again, you would discover that the sons of Samuel himself, who actually took over from Eli, were not spared that same thing. They too fell into that problem. Okay, they became too high-handed, and the people complained, and that was the process that led to them demanding a king. Okay, and Israel shifted from being the system that was governed by sort of a prime minister to a system that was governed by a king. Okay, so this is how it happened. So the same thing happened to David also. Okay, David struggled with his sons. He was chased around by his own son, Absalom. Okay, there was adultery taking place, incest took place within his family. His sons were killed. Most of his sons were killed by Absalom. And those things. So he had the same problem. So why? And this problem seems to be happening again in the 21st century throughout the life of Christianity itself. Okay, so corruption is is one pungent issue that Christians tend to fall into. Okay, especially in the 21st century, this is what is being realized. Okay, that Christians tend to fall into corruption. There are some countries that have been labored by this, and one example is Lebanon, that was formerly a Christian-dominated country and was taken over by Islam. Okay, another example is Nigeria, that is almost 50% Christian and is experiencing a lot of corruption. Okay, and of course we know what happened in the 5th century AD, where Christianity fell under the Roman Empire. Of course, in the last podcast you would have heard about that. Okay, so this is what is going on. Why is Christianity being belabored by corruption? Okay, this is the problem. Okay, and we know what is happening in the West also. Okay, those things. Okay, the West is being exhausted. The Christian, they are even getting to a point where they're denying their Christian heritage because they are exhausted. They don't know where to go from there. Okay, seemingly. Okay, even the Christianity they tend to profess today is only truly practiced by a small minority. Okay, the rest are just culturally affiliated. They are not really practicing Christians. Okay, it's one thing to be a practicing Christian, it's another thing to be just culturally affiliated to Christianity. Okay, so this is what is going on. Why so much corruption within Christianity? Immorality, another thing. Okay, Christianity tends to be liberal, and this is the difference between Christianity that is practiced today and Islam that kind of usurp Christianity, especially in the Middle East. Okay, what the Prophet Muhammad did was to institute a stricter form of observance. Now, when you look at it, you discover that a lot of what Islam practices is actually a Christian heritage. You go to the book of Corinthians, you see what the Apostle Paul said. Women must cover their heads. This is exactly what Islam tries to practice, okay? By introducing the head covering. Yes, that is what the Apostle Paul was saying. And when you look at the Reverend sisters, still do that up to today. They cover their heads. Okay, so it's a Christian practice that is not being enforced, but only among the clergy, of course, but is being said to be an archaic practice. Okay, so immorality tends to infiltrate Christian ranks. Okay, especially when you see what is going on right now in the Middle East. Anywhere where Christianity rules, it tends to be a little too liberal and allow the entrance of immorality. Okay, and then number 3 issue, which affects also Islam, okay, is the practicing fetish practices or slipping into witchcraft. So this is an issue that affects also Islam, but also is very easily affects Christianity. And this was what the Israelites struggled with throughout their stay in the Promised Land, which caused their removal from that place. Okay, so this is what we see. These are 3 points that we need to continuously emphasize when we are talking about Eli's predicament. Okay, Eli's predicament. So this is Eli's nemesis. We talked about Eli's nemesis, and this is what we are experiencing in Christianity today, and especially here in Africa, where it was said that Christianity is going a mile wide but only an inch deep. Okay, this is what happened in the first between the 3rd century AD and the 10th century. Okay, and Christianity was removed from North Africa, from the Middle East. Okay, so and it's still happening again after the missionary expedition from Europe and from America into sub-Saharan Africa. It's about 100 years now, or a little more, and the same thing is happening. Okay, there is crisis all over the world, while the West itself that brought the gospel is going extremely liberal. Africa itself is suffering from the invasion of those fetish traditional practices that threaten to remove Christianity, and also of course the threat of Islam itself. So this is what is going on. Okay, and we will now talk on the influence of those parallel systems that claim to establish better systems than what Christianity is doing. Okay, they actually come in, and I've been trying to mention this throughout the beginning of this this podcast. Okay, the influence of Islam, for instance. Okay, trying to correct the mistakes it observed during the dominance of Christianity. Remember, Islam started just about the 5th century BC. Okay, it's not as old as Christianity. It actually took over the territory Christianity was ruling. Okay, and so in what it was doing was trying to correct some of the things it saw as things it did not really accept being practiced in Christianity. For one, it rejected the death and subsequent resurrection of Jesus Christ, and then instituted the Prophet of Islam as the Paraclete to replace the Holy Spirit, and then decided in doing that, his Hadith now took over the work of the Holy Spirit. And what he did was, of course, try to change those pronouncements of Jesus as applies to divorce, to polygamy, okay, and to things that affected morality, okay, dressing, for instance, okay. So these are some of the things that he tried to do, okay. That is what Islam, okay, the Prophet of Islam tried to do. Another system that tried to usurp Christianity was communism. And communism, of course, theorized by Karl Marx, okay, a form of socialism, was first implemented, okay, by Lenin in the USSR, okay, after his party took over in the USSR. And what it tries to do is to create that very strict communal system in which people are forced, literally forced to obey, rather than the freedom that Christ introduced in volitional obedience. Okay, of course, Judaism is another form of that. But remember, Judaism, like I said, actually is something that is a kind of a system that is far, far ahead of every other system. And that is why we Christians believe that God, that is God's intervention. Because of that understanding that it came way, way more advanced from every other system in the world. Okay, when the people in the world were all practicing, all sorts of things, terrible things, Judaism was more advanced. That is why we believe that it was introduced by God. Okay, and in the failure of forceful conviction, Jesus came to introduce free will. Okay, and so this is what communism and Judaism reject about Christianity. Okay, and they try to enact this kind of discipline and forceful obedience to God. Of course, Judaism has since moved away from that. Okay, but communism still tries to do that. Okay, so this is another one. Now the third one is atheism. Okay, atheism, of course, based on science alone, tries to go to the other extreme by making use of the freedom that Christ talks about, and also freedom that is generic to human existence, to entrench science as the rule, okay, that we work by. Okay, so these are just those three systems that try to usurp Christianity. Okay, the parallel systems in this light. So while looking at this, I have talked a lot about this in other podcasts. These are the things that the leadership of the church has to understand. Understanding Eli's predicament. Okay, Eli is the ideal, the Jewish ideal, the Christian ideal. He has to deal with these ideals, and it is not strange that he struggles with them. But the question remains: how does he solve these problems? Does he listen to those philosophers in Islam, or in communism, or in atheism that try to solve it their own way, or does he insist on what the Bible says? Okay, a lot of the things that these people are saying are found in the Bible, of course, but that is what makes it very, very difficult to lead in Christianity. It's very difficult for them to read. So I will conclude this podcast shortly after this. There are many things that you will never hear in the media, on the streets, the good that Christianity has done. Okay? The good that Christianity is doing. You go to countries all over the world that Christianity has touched over the centuries. I have spent time to talk about the legacy established in education by the Christian kingdoms before Islam was even born. The schools of Alexandria, of Carthage, Constantinople, okay, Rome, all those scholarly legacies that were established way before Islam, that gave Islam the foundation it needed to establish what it established after, okay? And we know that Islam itself is a precipitate from a compromise between Judaism and Christianity, okay? So this is what we see. There's a lot of good that Christianity has done. Christianity midwifed the growth of science, okay? A lot of the early scientists were Christians, okay? And it's the break of mainline science from Christianity started during the Renaissance, okay, when of course Christians could not move away from a religious dogma into a more liberal form of thinking, okay. And when I'm talking about liberal form of thinking, I'm not talking about moral concepts. I'm talking about the debate between science itself, phenomenological concepts, existential concepts, okay, the debate between science and philosophy, okay. Christians could not move beyond the biblical dogma, and so they broke quite violently from science at a point. But they established that environment in which science was able to mature and to be established in the world, okay. A lot of them were very ardent, were very committed, devoted Christians, okay. So this is what we need to know, and when we know this, so there are a lot of Christians all over the world doing very wonderful things, okay. Minority Christians in Asia, in China, in India, participating in the growth of their own nations, okay. Christians in Russia during the USSR, they were suppressed, under the communist system, but they are still participating in the growth of that nation, okay. Of course, the US started as a Christian nation. We cannot forget that, even though today it is only culturally affiliated, and there are a lot of people in the US that will actually deny that historical beginning of that country. Europe itself, of course, we can never deny that, okay. So there's a lot of good that Christians have done over the centuries, okay. And even within Christianity itself, there is that maligning or marginalization of smaller groups that try to hold on to the genuine heritage, because Christianity has gone through a lot of liberalization over the centuries, and this is some of the cause, because of the inability to actually define the extent to which Christ's liberal agenda, starts and stops, okay. And so the desire to continue to liberalize, is of course a natural human tendency. When prosperity comes, they want to liberalize, okay. But it is the work of the church as established by Christ, okay, putting Peter as the head, which the position that the Pope occupies today, to try to delineate those issues, try to discuss and to establish those issues. Of course, other denominations also have their own leadership that are in charge of these things. But gradually Christianity has slipped into a, kind of a manageable posture, okay, that we only deal with things we can manage, and we tend to ignore the real responsibility behind it. The film The Book of Eli tries to expose this as false, okay, tries to say that there is a lot of responsibility behind it, but it depends on how you see that responsibility. Do you take it as merely mystic religious responsibility, or do you take it as holistic? Okay, and this is what theologians try to solve. Okay, especially here in Nigeria, we see a lot of mysticism going on, but it is more than that. It is holistic. The Christian life is holistic. Okay, and so theologians try to solve that problem. There are a lot of good Christians in Nigeria that have contributed to the growth of Nigeria. Some of them have been forced overseas. You will never hear that in the media, what these great Christians are doing here in Nigeria. You only hear the negative things, how Nigerians scam and all that. Okay, a lot of the Christianity you see is not really Christianity, it's just traditional practices. Okay, with the name of Jesus Christ on the top, you know, just to make it look good. Okay, so this is the problem. We need to understand this. Okay, and when we understand this, we'll be able to understand the predicament that church leaders are in today and the world is in. And if we understand the part that religion actually plays, a lot of people believe that religion is unnecessary, but we know where the world is going without religion. Okay, and if you are realistic and practical to yourself, you will know what we need to do. Okay, and these are the issues that continue to plague us. Okay, and especially is on the plate of the new Pope and on the plate of the leaders of the different denominations. Okay, Eli's predicament is a predicament, an existential predicament, is a phenomenological predicament. That is why Christianity is built on the foundation of education, because education tries to solve these issues, and the overemphasis on the mystics removes from this reality. And when we solve this, we'll be able to solve the problem of Eli's predicament. I am David Ungichinki for you today in Searching the Heart.
A sign of hope still lingers in the evening sky, and the cock still crows at dawn, that the children still have a future, that even in the dark, their eyes still glow with hope, for that pathway to justice, peace, and equity, that even in their youth, they will see a better Nigeria, and they shall have cause to smile again, that the elderly will lay down their heavy burden and cease from their struggle, and in their twilight they will see a glimmer of hope. At 50, let peace reign from engraved in gold and grow. A Christian partnership for a better humanity.
Discover a transformative journey into the kingdom of heaven. Following the initial publication, the author dives deeper with two insightful follow-up books. Ever felt disconnected from God even in worship? Explore how God's unconventional ways can transform your life. How can you align with divine plans, avoiding distractions? Find answers in The Kingdom of Heaven on Earth and The 3, Illuminating Christian Truths and Prophetic Practices. Unlock profound insights guiding you toward a deeper connection with God. Don't miss out. Dive into this enlightening exploration today. Click the link on the caption to get your copy.